Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Dynamic Range Day webcast. 2021 started in 2010. It's pretty wild to think it's been going that long and so much has happened. In fact, there's a ton that's happened, and there's a ton of things that I want to kind of share with you all this evening for me. I know what it is with you, but first of all, I should introduce my guests. I've got three people who've come along to kind of keep me company here this evening. First of all is Ian Stewart. Ian, just say hi and tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, yeah, I'm a mastering engineer. I'm a blog contributor for Isotope. I wear many hats, but those are kind of some of the main ones. I'm based in Western Massachusetts, out in the middle of the woods, and yeah, that's me.
Very cool. And then we have William Duvet. Say hi.
Hi. I'm I'm a live sound engineer, but since COVID, I do more and more mastering every day, and I'm based in the north of France for now.
Yeah, fantastic. And I should also say that William is up for the Dynamic Range Day Award. He did the sound for a live concert with a band called The Blaze, which is visually and musically and audibly stunning. So in fact, I will share the link for that now in the chat while I think of it for anybody who would like to see it. I strongly recommend, if you're a fan of Dynamic Range Day and Dynamic Range in general, I think you will love it. I've just posted that link there. And finally, Dan DeCenzo.
Hey, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. I'm Dan. I'm based in Belgium, mastering engineer since 2005. So it's quite a while now, and also product specialist for Isotope since 1 year now. And yeah, that's me.
That's funny. I just realised we have two Isotope representatives with me this evening. That's not a plan, but Isotope is a very cool company, so I'm quite happy for that to be the case. Okay, so let me get my list of things that I want to tell you about. Oh, first of all, I need to apologise. I realised that my meme activity today has been poor. There have been no new memes, and I shared one old meme. I do have one that I've been working with, and if I can find the right button, I will show it to you. It's still in Photoshop and I haven't managed to do it yet. So let's get the Photoshop window up here. Hopefully you can see that. This was recommended by my sons. Oops, you added too much butter, sugar, flour, baking soda, and egg. They all make cookies. And then you get a loudness. If you add too much loudness, you get square wave. And I was thinking of putting the caption in of butter could be reverb, sugar could be delay, flour could be EQ, baking soda could be chorus maybe. I don't know whether you guys think that's funny or not, but I thought it was quite funny. Oh, and there's also a fantastic meme which you'll need to look in my Facebook thread. I will share it later. I commented earlier that on the previous webcast, my COVID hair looked particularly dynamic. And somebody sent me a great cartoon with a joke inspired by that comment. So I encourage you to look for that. I will share it later on if I remember. So I think I'm feeling pretty positive this year. I feel like there's all kinds of interesting news in the world of dynamics and loudness. Just for example, Spotify in the last month have removed their limiter. Almost. If you're a subscriber, they have 3 loudness settings, and one of them is for noisy environments. And in that case, their distribution loudness level is higher, so they will use a limiter in that case. But for the default setting and for the quiet setting, which covers most users, there's going to be no more limiting on Spotify if they're lifting up quiet tracks. So if you upload something that's quiet, it will get lifted up to, so the peaks are at -1, and then it will stop. So that is I think a major benefit, and that follows on from the change that they made around about Christmas, where they have started to use LUFS. So now we have great consistency between the majority of the online streaming platforms. Apple really is the only major player that is an odd one out. Everybody else is using LUFS and is more or less at -14 in terms of the normalization. And, as I've said often, I'm sure people watching this kind of know my mantra by now. That's not to say that anybody needs to aim at -14 LUFS. If you want to master your music loud, that's fine by me. But I think it's important to know what happens to that music when it gets played at -14, which is what it's going to happen online, which is where most people are discovering things. So I think that's kind of cool and interesting. I spent 2 hours this afternoon, appropriately enough, taking part in an AES meeting talking about a new set of guidelines for streaming loudness, discussing the kind of the finer points of that. And that's due to be released sometime soon. There are some revisions that need to be made, but they've been working on that for a year. I think that's very positive, not so much because it's radically different from the guidelines that came out 2 or 3 years ago, but this time I think we have all now of the major players in terms of the streaming platforms involved in that process and engaged in the conversation. So I'm really hopeful that that is going to get a response from them going forward. Spotify obviously are already making a ton of great moves. They originally were at -11, they've gone down to -14. Now they're using LUFS. Now they've disabled the limiter. I think all of this is very positive because it gives us as mastering engineers and artists much more flexibility to master or mix, create the music as we think it sounds best and not be concerned about having to compete in terms of loudness. And, that really is the kind of the message that I would hope to put out this year about Dynamic Range Days. It's going in the right direction and we genuinely don't need to be so concerned. There's been a ton of dynamic music released recently, and I'll talk about some of my favourites for the award a bit later in this webcast. But I think the other thing today that's been great is just hearing lots of positive stories. Ian and I were in a clubhouse room earlier on today with a bunch of other mastering engineers, and most of them were saying they are feeling less pressure from their clients to master things super loud. Piper Payne, who's a fantastic, well-known mastering engineer in the US, who I'm sure many of you are aware of, shared a story with her, something that happened to her this year where she had mastered an album, got the digital release sounding great, and gone for a pretty loud result, which the clients were happy with. It was all signed off. And then they asked for the vinyl master, and she did what she usually did, which is a version that, because the pressure for extreme loudness is not as significant on vinyl, and actually you can't cut vinyl super hot because of the limitations of the format. She provided a master that had more dynamics, more life to it, and the clients actually said, okay, but that one sounds better than the original. And she said, well, yes, that's because it has more dynamics, and they loved that new dynamic version. So in the end, the vinyl version got released on CD, which, that's the kind of story that warms the cockles of my heart, because it's exactly what I'm kind of saying is, imagine you're mastering for vinyl. That master is going to sound great everywhere. Katie Tavini also had a similar story, and Ian, I think you had a success story along those lines, didn't you?
Yeah. Basically, short version. I got asked to do a test master for a new client, someone I hadn't worked with before, and so I did kind of my normal thing that sounds good to me, and retains a lot of the punch and impact from the drums. And then I thought, well, if they're asking for test masters, they might be asking a bunch of other engineers. They're probably going to get a bunch that are really hot. So let me do kind of a louder version as well. So I did that, and then I took the loud version and loudness matched it for the potential client. And so I had now had 3 versions. I had my kind of original dynamic version, a loud version turned down by 3 or 4 dB or whatever it ended up being, and then the loud version. And I put those all in kind of one lossless playlist player for them and sent it off, and heard back a few days later, and they said, oh yeah, we love this, especially the dynamic version. So I think, the fact that they're really able to do an apples to apples comparison on that really made it stand out. And I think the fact that more and more streaming platforms are, using these same kind of reference levels, right, about -14, people are hearing that, right? They're getting music out there that maybe hasn't been squashed as heavily, and they're hearing it compared to stuff that has and going, oh, yeah, this can really work.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, and that's always been my hope, and I've been talking about it for years. I think I wrote my first blog post saying that I'm pretty sure it was either 2009, 2010. I wrote a blog post saying that Spotify will end the loudness wars. I think at this point I have to say they're taking their time about it, but I agree. I think more and more people are aware of this, and are asking questions, and finding the answers either by doing tests where they upload themselves, or by using the loudness penalty website, or by reading information that other people have supplied. So yeah, I mean, it's just great to hear that. And there were a bunch of examples of that kind of thing through the day, which was just really nice to hear about. So that's great. The next thing I was going to talk about is something that's slightly less, I guess, is the flip side to that, which is, I mean, there is a lot of positive stuff happening, but there's also a lot of still very loud, very crushed releases out there, and mastering engineers telling me they're under a lot of pressure to have to produce material that is super loud. And one of the big challenges is something that Bob Ludwig mentioned on last year's Dynamic Range Day webcast, which is just the fact that a lot of the mix files that get supplied to us as mastering engineers are already super loud, either because that's the engineer's taste, or because they have felt the need to provide a reference that is super loud because of their concern that their clients might not be happy unless they heard that. They're expecting that. And obviously that creates a big challenge for the mastering engineer, because if the clients already love a super loud version, then it's much harder to sell them on a version that it's more dynamic, but it's going to sound quieter. And you're kind of immediately into, well, I want you to think about this, this, and this before you listen to my master, which is, ideally I would like to be able to just present them with the master version and for them to basically love it, even if they want a few tweaks. So I mean, it's certainly a challenge. Thankfully it's not something that I deal with too often. But then I have a name for, being a dynamics fan. So not many people come to me expecting super loud masters. Dan, is that something that's happening to you, or have things improved this year? What's your feeling about what's going on?
Yeah, I have to say that I'm a little bit like you. I have the chance that I'm working with clients who know already how my vision of mastering is, and since ever, I like to make mastering that serve the work. And when it's about a discussion to be loud, then I'm always proposing, this compromise and everything around it like I also did to show them the difference between a dynamic version. And my main concern is it's more about DJs, because I'm doing also lots of mastering for DJs and clubs. And we had as well a clubhouse discussion a few days yesterday, actually, with Jonathan Weiner and Luca Pretolesi. And I'm facing a little bit the same as him, because DJs nowadays, after the vinyl era, they are used to play with records or digital records that already hitting 0 dBFS. So they are not used, like myself when I started as a DJ in 91, to beat match the vinyl, but also level match the vinyl. That was the first thing that I needed to do before I actually level matched or beat matched. So which sometimes when I'm giving or deliver a dynamic master, then I got the feedback, why is my master 1 or 2 dB not less loud than other? So I say, you just need to gain to use the gain of your DJ mixer, and to level the and such. So I always proposed back then to deliver 2 versions, one for the DJs or download stores, and one for the streaming services. But it's such a mess for the distribution, and I'm kind of used to work with one distributor who take care of delivering 2 versions. but it's not always the case. So I try to kind of making a compromise version about, yeah, you know. So, but regarding a discussion about hot master, hot mixes, yeah, it happens sometimes, but then it's a lot of communication and back and forth. And when it's not worked, then I say simply no, it's not working for me because it's not my vision of mastering.
Yeah, and that's always a tricky one, isn't it? Is that kind of balancing act we do of talking to people, trying to explain to them our concerns about what may happen if things get too loud, without trying to impose our idea of it onto them. It's interesting what you're saying about the two versions, because that's something that I've suggested to people, a loud version for the club and then another one for release. But it's interesting what you were saying about the distributors in the sense, so the both versions get a proper release. Is that what you're saying? And that's where there's a challenge. Because I was imagining that if it's going out to DJs, it would maybe be sold through a different avenue or made available in a different way so that it'd be easier to keep those apart. But maybe that's not the reality necessarily.
No, not really, because when clients, and most of my clients are indie artists or labels, so they are using services like TuneCore or CD Baby or whatever, and for them it's a no-go to have two versions and split them. I think that for a certain time DistroKit was able to do it, but still not very sure. So yeah. There is only one distributor, it's called EPM. It's mostly known for electronic music, and I'm working close with them all the time. They are really into that to really propose two versions for one for the download stores, means Beatport, Juno Download, and such, and one for all the streaming services. But it's a little bit challenge because even if my clients used to use, for instance, two distributors, let's say one for streaming services and one for download stores, first it's costly, and secondly it was a mess because they crossed the versions, and so I had a download version on the streaming services and vice versa. So yeah,
it's a real shame, and I know that it's not. I mean, I'm kind of similar to you. I got into music back in the days when, to be a DJ, you loudness matched and beat matched and all the rest of it. And it kind of feels like these days people have certain aspects of it easy, right? Because they just load the files up. But I think it's true to say that most of the DJ software, even the ones that have some kind of loudness compensation built into them, there's Tractor, what's the other one? Serato. I actually contacted Serato support to discuss it to them and had a kind of back and forth with them, and their manual actually suggests that you peak normalize the music, right, in order to maximize the gain. But that means that anything that is mastered a bit lower, you're not going to be able to turn it up without clipping. So it kind of goes backwards. And I tried to persuade them that they should change it. They weren't receptive to that last time I spoke to them, but I might have to revisit that and start talking about it in more detail just to try and put some pressure on there. Now it's a really interesting challenge, and I think that's one that's going to be tough to crack. But hopefully, as people start to hear more dynamic version everywhere else, maybe they will start to appreciate that more in the club as well. And I know William does live sound, and I'd like to talk to him in a minute about that topic as well. How dynamic versus crushed music works on a PA and in a venue. But we'll kind of save that because he's part of the award section. The other thing I want to share with you guys briefly, I don't want to take too much time, but I'm really excited to be able to give you a sneak preview of I was going to say my new plugin, but it's actually an update of Perception. So some of you may know the Perception plugin was designed to help with all of these challenges that we're talking about. When you're mastering, one of the you go through the process, you master your music, it sounds great. Then you go back and you compare it with the original mix, and it's tough to make a fair comparison because the mix is so much quieter. So you have to match the levels by ear and switch between them, which is a skill that takes a lot of time to learn and is best done with a dedicated mastering console with different signal chains and stuff. So Perception was a plugin, my first plugin, to help people with this. It automatically loudness matches and sync compensates the music, so you can do a really fair A/B comparison. And one of the things that people asked for from day one was whether it was usable in mixing, and the answer was, well, kind of, but not really. So next month we are releasing it's Perception version 2, but we've renamed it Perception AB to help people understand immediately what it does from the name. And it is optimized for use in mixing. And my hope is that in the same way that Perception has helped people hear the effects of the loudness processing in mastering, Perception AB will help people hear the effects within the context of their mix. And I just thought you guys might like to see a sneak preview of it. So I'm going to share my screen. This is going to get a bit messy because of the way ScreenFlow works, but let's go for that. And then hopefully that's Photoshop again. Need to move this over here. And okay, so here we are in Logic. This is a mix that was of a song that I did for my good friend Dan Ecclestone, who is a member of the band Ember Rev. And actually, would encourage all of you to head over and check out their music. It's very cool. They're on German Shepherd Records. You can go to germanshepherdrecords.com/artists/ember-rev. They have several albums out. This was their first album, and it was very much a home recording effort by Dan. And one of the reasons I love it is that it has some really quirky instrumentation in it. So it's got kind of distorted ukuleles and prepared pianos and an acoustic bass. And I thought I could begin to show you how this works by just playing you an example of the acoustic bass. So hopefully you guys can hear that. Now, of course, in fact, I will just flick back. Can somebody say yes, you can hear that, just so I know it's working?
I can.
Excellent.
I don't know about anyone else, but
I think if you can, hopefully everybody else can. So obviously we could come over here and we could bypass both of those plugins, and then I could listen to it without the EQ and the compression, but it gets way quieter. So this is where Perception comes in. You put an instance in at the beginning of the plugin chain and you say, I want that to be a pre-instance. It's pre-processing. Then you come in and you put another instance at the end of the chain. Oops, click the wrong button. And you say that you want that to be post-channel, because it's in a mix, so it goes on the channel. And now we have a window where we can, first of all, it syncs, just in case there's any latency involved. I think in this case there isn't. And now we can flick between the two. Oh, I've disabled the processing. There we go. So you can see we have a loudness reading for the post audio and a loudness reading for the pre audio, and we can flick between them. But we have the same problem. There is a big level difference. So I can click match level, and now you can see that the pre signal has been lifted by 13.3 dBs. By the way, the -6 figure there looks scary, but look where the fader is. It's way down. It doesn't end up being that loud, I promise. So now we can bypass that very quickly. And suddenly you can see that the somewhat aggressive EQ profile that I have for this track is doing something that I like. Overall, I'm happy with that sound. The track is soloed at the moment. If I unsolo it and we listen to it in the context of the mix, so I'm much happier with that. Even though they're at matched loudness, I can hear that the combination of EQ and compression I've used on that channel is of benefit to me. That's good. That's a good start. But the other nice thing you can do is you can say, okay, well, maybe if I want to do exactly the same thing for the distorted ukulele parts and maybe the drums, let's come in and select a bunch of channels here. Then we can come in and we can choose to put Perception in on all of those channels. If I hold down Shift, I can say that I want all of those instances to be pre-instances. Then I come down here and I put perception in at the end, and I say, okay, I want all of those instances to be post instances. And then when I hit play, all of those channels are now syncing, and I can now use the bypass all button to bypass all of those channels. If I just solo them so that you can hear the effect. Again, we have the level change, so I can come in and hold down shift and say I want to match the level of all of those. And now we have a level matched AB of all of those channels. Now I can unsolo them and I can use the bypass all again to get a loudness matched AB comparison of that kind of little mini subgroup that I've created within the mix. If I come up here and hold down shift, I'll just remove those loudness differences so you can hear. This is what would happen if I tried bypassing all of those without loudness matching them. They disappear, so I will rematch them and one more time. And I won't bother to show it to you now, but if I liked, I could actually add perception on all the channels in the mix and bypass all the processing in the mix with a single click, level matched and sync compensated. I'll just show you one of the channels that has some latency. Actually, I don't know whether I have one that has any latency on it. Yeah, there you go. There's 20 milliseconds of delay on that channel there. This will even work with an external analog hardware chain. And to my knowledge, there is no other plugin currently that will do this that's available. Ian Stewart has been beta testing it for us and playing with it. And Ian, didn't you say you managed to get it working on a mix with 60 odd channels? Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think the overall mix had 74 channels, and some of them were, just made sense to subgroups. So I think there are like 43 instances of perception AB across, 74 channels and buses and stuff. And yeah.
Fantastic. That's exactly what I want to hear. So we're very proud of that. We hope that that will help people. I mean, obviously in my mix, all of the processing that I did was beneficial. But if I had overcompressed, one of my pet peeves at the moment is people using a ton of parallel compression. Parallel compression in some cases is better than downward compression because it will get, it can kind of add density and warmth to the mix without kind of squashing those transients. But I think too much of it, everything just starts to sound cluttered. And my hope is that if people start using a tool like this in mixing as well as in mastering, that's going to help encourage people to keep their mixes dynamic. And if the mixes come to the mastering engineers dynamic, we can keep the masters dynamic, and hopefully everybody wins. As always, I'm being an optimist about that, but I hope you guys agree. Now, special treat for you watching this webcast. If you would like to get Perception AB, the new version of Perception, you can do so. The link is not on the main page of the site yet, but you can head over to meterplugs.com/perception-AB, and you can get it with a 30% introductory discount. But if you already own Perception, the original version, don't do that, because we're going to be emailing you. You may already have had the email with an exclusive upgrade discount, an even bigger upgrade discount for existing owners already. We want to thank people for supporting Perception and our work over the years. We wanted to give you guys the best deal we possibly could. So both of those special offers will be available for the next week, and the public launch of the plugin will be next month. So you guys are getting in early because you're fans of Dynamic Range Day, which may or may not interest you. Okay. So let me check my schedule. Yep, loud mixes, something to help. Now we can talk about the award. Some great nominations for the award this year. Let me get my list up so that I can remember all of the names. The first one I have is City Burials by Catatonia. Catatonia with a K for you UK people. I love Catatonia. I actually authored the enhanced CD of The Great Cold Distance for them a long time ago at this point. And I've loved their music, and especially the sound that they often go for since then. This is a big, aggressive, powerful, I guess progressive metal album, maybe. But overall, it's at minus 11 LUFS, which is, it's still on the loud side, but there's space in there to get fantastic dynamics in the sound. So I highly recommend that to anybody else listening. There's Angel's Flight by Biosphere, is a much more kind of ambient electronica kind of influenced album. The new Katie Melua album number 8, was mastered once again by Matt Colton, who won the Dynamic Range Day Award for his work on the James Blake album several years ago now. There is The Blaze live at Chamonix, which William, who is here with us, mastered. I'm going to talk to him about that in a minute. The new Ulva album, Flowers of Evil, it's interesting because I did funnily enough, I did a Blu-ray. I didn't have anything to do with the audio, but I authored the Blu-ray for them several years ago, and there's a very different sound on this record, but they, again, are keeping great dynamics in the music. The David Gray album, Skellig, that's a much more kind of acoustic, folky kind of album, but has fantastic dynamics to it. Stephen Wilson has done it again with the Future Bites. It's an amazing album. I love it. It has fantastic dynamics mastered by Bob Ludwig. I think minus 13 LUFS, that album overall. And the new Motorpsycho album, The All Is One, which is the third part in a trilogy that has been has been mixed by Andrew Sheps. And I had to include that because I just love the irony. Andrew mixed the Death Magnetic, which, we all know about. I saw him at the AES a few years ago where we shook hands and had a joke about it. He always says he won the loudness war with that record. There are lots of reasons to make stuff super loud. They had their reasons for that. But I love the fact that kind of given free reign to Motorpsycho is one of his favorite bands, I believe. So given free reign to do what he likes, he goes for quite a different sound. In this case, I've also got some honourable mentions that I put on the site. These I had to think hard this year because it's been a weird year. Less people have been released. A lot of albums have been put back. Less people have been releasing albums. The music industry is changing. There are a lot more singles coming out than albums these days. So I am considering maybe that in future the award could go to just single tracks. The only trick about that is that somebody might do one track that seems super dynamic, and then you have another one that comes out where it's not. I got really excited about, I think is it Rope? There was a Foo Fighters track a few years ago that had great dynamics, and I was really excited for the album, and it kind of didn't deliver in the way that I'd hoped. So I'm still thinking about that, but I do want to give a mention. Drake is this incredibly successful artist, obviously. His albums, I wouldn't say they're dynamic. They're pretty loud, but overall, the Scary Hours EP that he released just recently, overall minus 9 LUFS. It's not minus 3, it's not minus 4, thank goodness. And actually, I have to say, a ton of the urban stuff and R&B that's coming out at the moment has better dynamics, which is really positive and encouraging to see, I think. I've realised I don't know how to say this next artist's name. It's SZA. I don't know whether that's how you say her name or whether it's Za. But there's no album yet, but I'm really looking forward to hearing this album because there are 2 singles there, Good Days and Hit Different, both of which, again, it's not kind of, I'm a big fan of acoustic and folk and jazz albums and those kind of genres, but when you highlight them as examples of dynamics, people tend to react, well, of course they're super dynamic. They're this, that, or the other. So I love it when unexpected genres make great use of dynamics, and I think those singles are examples. Imogen Heap released a single this year, Last Night of an Empire, mastered by Simon Hayworth, the Wing Commander. Sounds amazing. I love that song, and fantastic dynamics on that. And Pay Away in Pain, recent St. Vincent single, also has great dynamics. So I'm going to be watching to see what that album is like when it comes out as well. But we are lucky enough to have with us this evening William Duvet, who mastered the Blaze live gig. I mean, if you haven't clicked on that link that I shared at the beginning of the stream, and if you've joined recently, please head back up to the top of the comments in YouTube to look at that link. It's an amazing live gig on top of a mountain in Chamonix, I think, which is on the French-Swiss border, I believe, above the clouds as the sun sets. They have drones flying around, Steadicam footage. It's an incredible venue to stage a gig, and it sounds incredible. So, William, thank you so much for that. I mean, I know you're kind of passionate about dynamics and keeping great dynamics in all the music that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that project? Is that something that you encourage the artists to do, or did they come to you with the vision that they wanted a great dynamic master?
Yes, of course. It first began by a teamwork from the company I was working with, called Intelligence Audio. They've been asking Intelligence Audio to prepare their live session, their live Ableton session for playing gigs. So we did an entire mixing preparation for this, and the dynamic vision about it is to have the more dynamic as possible in their mix. So we are working, we are using l'UFS, and their mix is approx 20 minus 20 l'UFS. So we have like 20 dB of headroom, because in the live sound industry, you have to, the audience is in the venue to feel the sound. We have to move the air in the audience. So the more air is moving, the more feel, the more vibe the audience is getting. So we did that with the Blaze. They've been doing their show in Chamonix. Then I got the multi-track back to me, and I did the master using a live console. So I did the master of the entire set. I did not cut each song. So I was using a live sound console to do this. And the only thing we did is basically put a limiter at the end of the signal path, and that's it.
And presumably it wasn't working very hard.
No, not at all.
And I mean, that video has a ton of views and a ton of amazing comments. I mean, the sound is gorgeous. It's big, it's wide, it's lush, it's open. Everything that we want. But it still gets pretty intense at some points. It builds up. And I think over the entire sort of 80, 90 minutes, overall, it's about minus 14 LUFS, which I love, because so many people tell me, oh, you can't get the sound at minus 14. So I literally will kind of say, have you heard this? I mean, it must be really satisfying. Have you had good feedback from it? Were they happy? And, the fans, are they happy?
Yes, they was really happy with it. I was using the Loudness penalty plugin just to check if I was not too hot or too smooth, but I tried to aim to minus 14, but it's not it's a live sound, so it has to be less dynamic at the moment, and some others with lots of air and to breathe.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing to hear, and I'm interested in what you're saying about the live sound as well, because we talked earlier about the challenges for club music, where it's the DJs playing stuff out who want stuff to be super loud, but I was saying I've done so many things over the last couple of days, I forget when I was saying it, but maybe on the Clubhouse with Ian earlier, or perhaps it was this morning. It never really makes that much sense to me, because dance music especially is so much of it is about the beat,
Yep.
and the beat is drums, and drums are, at the end of the day, a drum, it's either on or off. I mean, I know you can have different levels of dynamic in a drum, but it's very much about that contrast, right, between the pulse or not the pulse. So it makes no sense to me that the more you reduce that, once you get beyond a certain, we know we can lift things up into the sweet spot. That's going to work. But you go beyond a certain point, and you're just taking away from all that. You have to take more of the bass out to get it loud and all the rest of it, and it just kind of takes away from the heart of it. So yeah, if you want people to feel the rhythm and the a pounding kick drum or whatever it is in a club, like you say, you need to be able to move the air. So you need to have that contrast so it's kind of strange the way so much dance music is pushed so hard. What's your experience, with stuff playing out in a live environment and in a club? You find that dynamics work really well, I'm guessing.
Yes, it is. I've done lots of electronic music nights with lots of DJs, and in live sound we have sound limitation. I mean, sound pressure level limitations.
Right.
So the more you're amplifying a crushed mix, the more level you get. So people get ear fatigue a bit quicker, and you have also, if you're too loud, you can have the police to come at front of us and ask you to turn it down. So with crush meets, we are using lots of tools to lift a bit of highs and to create some energy in the lows, just to rebalance the mix in order to respect the sound limitations.
Yeah, it's great to hear. Now, do you have to work, because another objection that I've heard about especially music venues is that because of the regulations about sound levels, noise levels, in lots of cases, the amps have been set and locked away in a cabinet. So if you want to achieve a certain level in the room, you're going to have to push the music up, I guess digitally, as loud as you can. So that's effectively a gain staging problem, where if you don't crank it right up, you're not going to achieve enough level. Do you find that's but then other people have told me, no, if you speak to the guy, all of this stuff is doable. It's actually kind of a lack of understanding from people of how the mixer works, or the best way to set things up. Do you have to work specifically with, do you take out are you taking your own PA, or are you working with venues, and how does that work?
It depends on the venue. Sometimes the PAs are already in the venue. Sometimes in the venue there has been research and measurement to set the level of regulations about noise and stuff. So sometimes, yes, there is a little box behind the stage with just measuring the sound in the venue, and if there's too many eyes, there's a limiter on the eyes just to push it down. It exists, but I do more stuff with my own PA, so we are doing what we want, and we are scaling the PA to be able to produce lows with enough headroom for the people.
Yeah, and I'm betting that sounds amazing. I remember showing my age again, years ago, about when U2 went out on the Zooropa tour, and they basically ran their PA at half capacity. so that if there was some kind of technical problem and half of the whole thing just went down, they would still be able to play it out as loud as necessary. But it also meant they had this phenomenal headroom, and facility there. It's great to hear. Dan, kind of talking about the concerns that you have with DJ stuff earlier on. I think there's this whole thing, a lot of it is down to perception. I have this theory that a lot of mastering engineers master things much louder by default than they actually need to, because they're concerned that if they don't, they'll get an adverse reaction from their clients. So I would love kind of mastering engineers to experiment a bit more, take a few more risks, because my experience is that actually, if I say to people, I don't think it needs to go that loud, if you want it that loud, maybe you should try someone else. They will say, well, let's hear your version. And then you do your version for them and they love it. Or you have things like Piper Payne's example where, they loved the more dynamic vinyl release or whatever. Do you think those concerns that are coming back to you from your clients about the DJs wanting the stuff to be super loud, is that based on their actual experiences? They've had people, or do you think that's just this kind of idea, this another meme that's running around the community and that people are using to justify the super high levels?
No, I think there are. Once I'm convinced them with examples and lots of discussion, they agree. It's just that it's hard to convince them the whole DJ world to use this gain knob on the mixers and to push their own record or my master 1 or 2 dB louder. That's a little bit more their concern. They are completely agree that actually a more dynamic version sounds louder at the same level than a squashed one. But they say I also need to sell, and the problem is with, for instance, beatports, there are no loudness normalization, so it's like old radio version that the louder it's because they are listening to the whole list of new releases, and they're just listening to a few seconds, and when it's quieter, then it's actually over for them already. Kind of, it's still a little bit this old fashioned thinking, but yeah. As soon everything with regulated, I don't know if that day will happen sometimes, but then it will solve a lot of troubles.
Yeah, it is. You're right about Beatport, and the other place, of course, is SoundCloud, which also the good news is, another bit of good news I forgot to mention at the beginning is that I know that SoundCloud are experimenting with loudness normalization, in fact, I've seen some blog posts saying that they have implemented it. We've done some tests and we've found that that's not the case. But I have my fingers crossed that normalization might come to SoundCloud. So maybe I need to try and start reaching out to some Beatport people and see whether we can get anybody there interested. Well, listen, thank you so much, guys. Of course, now we need to announce the winner of the Dynamic Range Day Award this year. And I'm torn because on the one hand, it would be nice to keep some mystery, but on the other hand, when I have the opportunity to have a great guest like William, I don't want to pass it up. So I guess it probably won't be any surprise to everybody to hear that William Duvet, you have won the Dynamic Range Day Award this year for the Blaze live at Chamonix. I'm delighted it's one of my favorite things that I've heard in the last year. I remember when you shared it with me, I was just like, yes, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. And I love being able to highlight. Any of the nominees this year would have been a worthy winner, but particularly because I love electronic music and dance music. It's a great pleasure. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Your 3-ton embossed gold waveform statue will be airmailed to you as soon as it exists, which it doesn't yet. But yeah, genuinely, congratulations, and thanks so much for coming on this evening and talking to us about it. And yeah, everybody should go and listen to that amazing gig.
Thank you, Ian.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. Okay, so that ends the scheduled part of the webcast. I am happy to take some questions if there are any. You guys, I don't want to thank you for your time. If you would like to hang around and help answer the questions, and if anybody in the audience has questions specifically for you, that would be great. But if you need to head off, I want to respect your time, so please feel free to do so. I'm going to take a look here and start scrolling through. Sirgador says he can't find Live at Chamonix on Spotify. I think it's on YouTube. I think it's on SoundCloud. It may not be on Spotify, I'm afraid. I will repaste that link, especially now that you guys know that it has won. Let's post that in. So that's there in the comments for you guys. John says, I mix and master how I think it sounds best, and usually when I drag it into loudness penalty, I'm usually within 1 or 2 dB. That's my experience too. I don't suggest using any of these numbers as targets. I've said this before. I think it doesn't make sense for an acoustic ballad to be at the same level to a rock tune, and but having said that, when I master the way, this is the thing, lots of people have the impression that I kind of master with my eyes glued to the meters and all the rest. It couldn't be further from the truth. I master so that it sounds good to me, and then I do check on the meters or loudness penalty or wherever towards the end just to see how it's going to sound. And yeah, I'm the same. The loudest stuff I get maybe comes in at a 3 dB penalty sometimes. Right, I'm going to scroll right back up to the top and have a quick look. If you guys, I don't know any of you have been watching. RJ says, no memes. I'm so sorry, RJ. I did have the one. I will. No, it's too late. I'm going to fall asleep as soon as this is done. I've been talking all day, but we've been working to get the Perception plugin, the Perception AB, ready for today. And also, as I say, I was in that meeting, the AES meeting today for a couple of hours. That was kind of ate into my meme generation time. But if you guys want to, I know some of you, it's still only the afternoon for you. Feel free to head out there and grab some more. Angie loved the dynamic hair. Thank you, Angie. RJ says the meme activity is very squashed. Yeah, it's very, very compressed meme activity today. Mika makes, I hope I pronounced that right, an interesting point. We're so used to compressed productions, we actually have to relearn an entirely new listening behavior again. I think that's true. I think that especially that's true of the younger generation. I'm aware that my kids hearing everything they hear is compressed. But then again, my generation grew up listening to FM radio, and that was all super compressed in order to get the signal strength up in areas where the signal was weak. So, it's, and I agree with, I think all of us individually have said this evening, and other people have said during the day, I think people are hearing more dynamic stuff, experiencing it and liking it and starting to choose. And I hope that continues. I've had my hopes have been up in the past before, and the pendulum has swung back the other way. So we'll see, but fingers crossed. Norberto says, good friend of mine, Norberto, just 5% of my clients are asking for a louder version. It's finally happening. So that's another example of a great story. Leon says, perhaps the restrictions on performing and general close proximity interaction have given artists and clients more time to learn something about loudness dynamics and ultimate sound quality. Maybe that would be cool if it was happening. There's some people saying they like the look of the new version of Perception, which is great. Getting down towards the end of the list. John asks, the short-term loudness should be what level or what range? I don't like telling people what to do in terms of levels because it depends so much on the material. But my personal rule of thumb is I start to check what I'm doing and make sure that I'm really happy with the results. If the short-term loudness, because remember, anybody who's kind of new to these things, so we're talking about LUFS, loudness units full scale. This international standard was developed a few years ago to measure loudness, and there are free loudness meters now. Most DAWs include a loudness meter of some kind. There are 3 types. There's the momentary, which is very rapid, fast moving. I don't find it that helpful for music. There's the integrated, which is an overall value for the song, which is what the streaming services use to decide how much to adjust the loudness if they need to. And there's the short term, which is it's averaged over 3 seconds. And I find that's kind of more helpful. It feels most like, I kind of grew up using a VU meter to judge loudness. I still use a plug-in emulation of a VU meter to judge loudness. And yeah, short term. So if it starts getting above -10, for me, that's where I start to be concerned. I think, you can push it for brief sections higher than that, depending on the material, and it'll probably be fine. But I think if the song, for me, a song that's intended to be loud all the way through, I will probably have around that -10 level, not too much louder. And then the overall value, the integrated value then is going to also be around -10. Now, if it's an album with plenty of variety, there could be other songs on the album that are -14 or -16 quite easily. And even when the loud sections are up there's not that many songs where it's literally the same loudness all the way through. But that is my suggestion. And I think you should also consider keeping the true peaks at -1, to basically protect everything. Even if you're doing masters for CD, everything these days gets ripped to a data compressed format like an MP3 or an ASC or a VOG Orbis or whatever it might be. OG Vorbis. Vogons, maybe the Vogons have something to do with all this. No, sorry. No, I've completely lost my tangent thinking about the Hitchhiker's Guide. Yes, headroom, peak headroom. If you want to, these codecs aim to reduce the file size by anything up to 90%. The amount of processing that goes into doing that is extreme. So it's kind of a miracle it comes out sounding like music at all at the end of it. But when you decode it, the peak levels will increase. So if something was peaking up at 0 to begin with, the peaks could go +1, +2, +3 after decoding, and that can get clipped in the decoder. So if you keep your true peaks going in at more like -1, that gives you a little bit of safety to allow that, and you follow my suggestion there of not going louder than -10 at the loudest moments. In my experience, you're going to be in great shape there to get a really nice clean encode and avoid that problem. So hopefully that helps. Ray Mears says, link to the new perception, please. I can do that. Give me 2 seconds. I will paste it in the chat for you. Actually, that's the wrong link. Let's just edit that. There you go. If you go there and decide you want to try it, we have a 30-day trial if you want to give it a go and see whether it works for you. The introductory discount should be pre-applied, so you should see the 30% discount there for you. Martin is saying, lately I see a lot of EDM producers using controlled clipping and less limiting. What's your opinion on that? I have an opinion about that, but I'm kind of curious to think what my guests think about. Ian, what do you use clipping, not use clipping, use a bit of both? What's your approach?
I will use clipping sometimes a little bit if I have something that's really, really kind of overly spiky and needs some taming. I find that a lot of times using a little bit of clipping and a little bit of limiting will get kind of a nicer result than just purely one or the other. That said, I don't know that I would strongly encourage it at the production stage. I mean, if it helps you get a sound that you're going after, then yeah, by all means, go for it. But if you're really, I don't know, it gets back to the whole topic of is loudness really necessary in a club environment and what's wanted there. So if you're worried about that and you want to have a mix that is maybe going to stand up better to higher loudness once it goes through the mastering process, yes, maybe a little bit of that can help. But I think so much of it honestly comes down to arrangement and sound choice, and like that's to me going to make a bigger difference in the end perceived loudness, whether it's dynamic or not, than whether or not you're using clipping at the production or mix stage. So I guess the other thing I would say about it is, I will use it, but at this point, I feel like in the box clippers, plug-in clippers have gotten really quite good, and so I would rather do it there in the box and have the option of removing it later, and for a vinyl master or whatever, than actually kind of the old school mastering thing was to clip your converters coming back into your workstation. And so there was a time when I would do that again if there was something that seemed like it warranted it, but at this point I really don't, and I'll just maybe do a little bit of that with a plugin.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about the using a plugin versus hardware. There's a lot of conversations out there about the best converters for clipping. I've never been a fan of converter clipping, but I haven't tested a ton of them. I'd be really interested for somebody to do some kind of head-to-head comparison with some of the big names to see how the plugins stack up. Because I agree. Dan, do you use clipping, not use clipping? What's your take?
Same as Ian. I used to use hardware clipping back then, but I don't do that anymore. And also sometimes in mastering, but it really depends on the program and audio program and the genre of music. I do though sometimes do stems mastering or stems mixing, whatever you can call it. And I also tend to guide the producers or the mixer to when there really needs to have this perception of loudness, to use more a parallel exciter or parallel compressor on the bus to control a little bit more the density, but still keep the dynamic. It's a little bit my goal and this is why I really like to use the stems mastering, not to fix the mix, but to control the dynamic and the density of the songs but keeping the dynamic. So I can be very kind of sound loud, but still be dynamic. That's all the trick is there. So, and yeah, sometimes clipping is used as an effect, I would say, in that case, but not as a final result. No.
Yeah, that's interesting what you're saying about stems, actually, because that was something that came up in a conversation I had earlier on today. There's lots of people talking about EDM and the fact that the heavily limited sound in EDM is part of the sound and therefore it's necessary. And I forget who it was I was talking to, but we were agreeing that actually, I think maybe it was on the webcast this morning with Russell, just kind of one option if you're interested in experimenting with dynamics in EDM, but you still want to get that heavily limited drum sound, for example. That's where I hear it the most, is that kind of almost completely flat, that thing where the snare hits and it almost has no transient. You can use heavy limiting or compression just on the drum bus and just pull the peaks back, right? So rather than pushing everything up to -6, you bring the output ceiling of the clipper or the limiter down to -6 to get the sound in the drums, and then have all that extra headroom around the other elements in the mix to work with. William, do you use clipping, limiting? What's your approach?
I tend to respect the original signal as much as possible. So I try to use as less as distorted tools to make the sound. So I don't really have an opinion on this, but I think the less tool you're using to modify the music, the better it gets. So that's my approach about it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'm the same in general. I very much prefer minimalism. So I guess everybody else has given their opinion. I'll come through. For me, I occasionally use clipping, but it's very much as needed. So, and the clue for me is if I'm mastering the music, if my ears tell me it's loud enough, and that the meters kind of look right, but I feel like it's lacking a bit of impact, then I will usually check what's happening in the limiter, because sometimes you can find that the limiter is actually too clean. Because what I would say is that, you basically have, on the one hand, you've got clipping, which is basically pure distortion, like hard clipping. On the other hand, you have limiting, where the signal never clips, but the peak levels have to be controlled in some other way. and that will also have an audible effect on the audio signal. You're going to hear that the blunting of transients and everybody's heard that thing where you have a really spiky drum sound going into an L1, and it comes out and all the attack on the drums has kind of disappeared. And then in between that, you've got this kind of scale of, there's soft clipping kind of over here, and there's limiters that have an element of clipping in the sound, and then there's using a compressor and a limiter. So for me, if I'm feeling like it seems to be loud enough, but it doesn't have enough aggression in the sound, then a little bit of clipping, and I'm talking a dB or two. And usually I'm splitting the load between the clipper and the limiter. So there I'm doing the opposite of what I described earlier. So I will actually have the output ceiling on the clipper maybe at +1 or +2. We're in floating point environment, so that can go through to the limiter, which adds maybe a dB or two of limiting, rather than if you took the clipper out, maybe the peaks would go up to +3 or +4, and that would hit the limiter and you trigger 3 or 4 dBs of limiting, if that makes sense. So again, there's an element of gain structure in there, but I think I'm going to say less than 1 in 10 masters I would use that. So I think it's a valid approach. But yes, the other thing I was going to say is over here there's a kind of limiting, no kind of hard distortion. Over here there's clipping, hard digital clipping, which is pure distortion. All of that stuff in between, it's all distortion. Any change to the signal is effectively distortion, and you just have to listen very carefully to what it does. If you push bass very hard into a hard digital clipper, you actually start to lose perception of the note, because the original sine wave gets kind of turned into a square wave. It all becomes harmonics. You lose the fundamental frequency, and it just dissolves. Sometimes that's an effect people want. Not for me most of the time. So thank you guys for all of your feedback on that. Comments saying yes, arrangement is definitely key. And yeah, actually that's a great point that you made, Ian, that I would reinforce is I think the risk with all of these kind of conversations is that people focus so much on the tools. Like for me, often people will come and say, oh, my master doesn't sound loud enough. And you take a listen and you measure it and the loudness is right up there, but the EQ is right off. It's just, it doesn't have enough low end or too much upper mids or whatever it is. And in those kind of cases, you give them a different EQ shape and something that maybe even measures a little bit lower, but it feels louder because it's moving more air in the room, because there's more power in the low end, for example. So yeah, I think you kind of changing the gear or changing the technique should be late in the chain of things you should be looking at. For me, it's always about coming back to, is the arrangement working? Are the internal dynamics of the song working? Is the right level of contrast between the verse and the chorus there? Is it too little? Is it too much? What is the overall loudness? How is the EQ? Is the EQ working? Is it balanced? Is it all of those things? And then, maybe I need X, Y, Z. I saw a comment about Spotify have said if you go above minus 14 LUFS, then the peak should be -2 dBFS. I've seen that. I think that's probably a little on the conservative side in my experience. I think the odd intersample peak is not going to be the end of the world. I regularly master stuff at kind of -12, -11, really loud things. And especially with the true peaks at -1 going in, I haven't noticed any major problems. Having said that, yet again, another complication, it depends on the data rate. So I'm doing my tests at 128 kilobits per second, I think, which is the standard on Spotify. If you take it down to mobile data rates, then it gets that much worse. On the other hand, if somebody's listening on a mobile device, how good is their converter? How good are the earbuds? It's a trade-off. The extent to which we're prepared to tailor what we're providing for streaming, I think, is a tough one, especially because the streaming quality is going to improve over time. I think we've got Spotify lossless coming soon. Hopefully that's going to help. I love using Quobuzz, which is a European lossless streaming service. And it's just, Apple Music and AAC is pretty good. But when you get back to lossless, it's like, my ears can relax a little bit more. More comments from John saying, yeah, true peak -1, long term -13 to -16, yeah, depending on the material. Colby, I apologize, says find that density contributes to dynamic range just as much as amplitude. Yeah, I think that's true. any opinions regarding the Opus codec now used on SoundCloud and often? No, I don't really. Life's too short to compare. I mean, because they keep changing it out. I mean, at this point, YouTube, depending on, I think they encode like 3 or 4 different streams. So on any particular platform at any given time, you could be getting different streams. It's, again, I very much ascribe to one master to rule them all. I'm going to make an optimized master that, I can't remember whether I said it in this webcast now or in an earlier one with Piper. One piece of advice I give to people is master as though it's going to vinyl. That's going to get you a great result on vinyl, but it'll also sound great on CD and on streaming and all the rest of it. And when it's encoded, so we're talking, not insane loudness, keeping the dynamics there. Don't go too heavy on the limiting. All of those things will contribute. That I much prefer that approach to. Plus the fact that most clients won't pay for multiple versions, and you can't get multiple versions up there on the streaming services anyway, because distributors, only want to take one file and supply it everywhere. Ian, did you have a?
Yeah, just a quick note on the Opus codec. I mean, Spotify, SoundCloud are very similar. I actually did an article for Isotope. I think if you search for mastering for streaming platforms, Isotope, you'll find it. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was something like 80 versions of a song I uploaded and recorded back down from SoundCloud to test how all these different factors are affected. But as part of that, I got to chat with a representative from SoundCloud, and they're doing the same thing. They use Opus on certain devices, platforms, whatever, but not all of them. Some of them are using AAC, some are using other things. So it's I don't think Opus sounds great from the platforms that I know I've used it on, but they tend not to be something where they tend to be more mobile devices and stuff, where the sound quality is kind of inherently compromised anyway.
Yeah, I've lost track. I know that there was one point where SoundCloud reduced the streaming quality of what they were putting out dramatically, I think, to try and save bandwidth, and there was a bit of an outcry. I think they've gone back on that, haven't they? They've gone back to a slightly higher data rate.
I think that's part of it, is that Opus is it can theoretically achieve similar sound quality at a much lower bit rate. My recollection, and don't quote me on this, but my recollection is that it was kind of developed more for telecommunications. That was kind of the intent behind that codec. So it's optimized for lower bit rates. So I think that was part of that, was that there was this announcement, we're using like 64K Opus for some devices, and everyone kind of went understandably. And but the caveat is that it's not all devices, and it's very dependent on. And the other thing is, like, they have a subscription service now, right? So if you're subscribed, you're getting a much higher quality stream than if you're just a free user on your phone or whatever. So it's never straightforward.
No, like all of this stuff, it's complicated. Absolutely. There's a question from Lars. Do you use tubes to gently take the top off and raise the level and keep the dynamics sounding good that way? Personally, I don't. I mean, I remember back in the day I used the Chiswick Reach valve compressor, which was a beautiful piece of kit. But I don't have anything tubey in my rack as a standard. How about you guys? Any fans of valves and tubes in the? Nope.
The next EQ I want to get has a tube stage that can be bypassed, but currently no.
Okay, Dan, how about you?
I'm using the SPL. I have the whole SPL suite here, and I'm using the SPL Iron as a compressor, but it's really a tone box, so I don't barely compress. Actually, it's the needle is barely not moving, so it's really just for the tone and character.
Okay. So you're looking for the extra harmonics and things in there. Yeah, that's nice. I mean, having said that, a ton of people do. They swear by them. I know at least one mastering engineer I can think of who I'm pretty sure always has some valves in the chain. That's not for me, but at the end of the day, if it sounds good, Lars, then go for it. It's I think, it's I'm not a big fan of defaults. I have a kind of a standard chain I can bring into a mastering situation that has a bunch of things that I use regularly preloaded on it, but they're all off to start with, and I just for me, the more minimal, I agree with William, the more minimal I can be in mastering, the better. So if I can just bring the loudness up and balance the level between the tracks, and it sounds great, then I'm happy and it's done. And if all I have to do is that and then a couple of EQ tweaks here and there, I'm still happy. If a little bit of dynamic processing is needed, a little bit of limiting, whatever it is, so it kind of builds up in layers. But I'm very much a minimalist. But there are all kinds of. I see lots of people talking about Soothe, this plugin by Erksound, which is this kind of sophisticated. It's kind of like a multi-band de-esser somehow that automatically pulls out some of the frequencies. I've played with it. It has some pretty startling results. I used the version 1 on 2 or 3 masters, and every time I did, the client came back and said, yeah, it sounds great, but there's something weird about the top end. Maybe that's because I was doing it wrong. Maybe not. It's a very powerful processor. You need to be careful with it. So it worries me when people say, I use this on everything. It worries me when anybody says, I use something on everything full stop. But it's all a case of what you're working on, what you need, what your taste is, all the rest of it. I'm aware that we're running on, so I'm just going to see. We probably just have room for maybe 1 or 2 other questions if there are any. Oh, that's interesting. Kev says he's seen a lot of remastered versions of songs within 3 years of a previous version, and they sound better. I think it's been down to your practices, Ian. You're winning. I would love it if that was true, Kevin. Thank you for giving me the credit. I don't know where I can take that. I mean, there's lots of us out there saying this kind of stuff, but that's great to hear that you're seeing some positive stuff. Definitely. And there's a question from Kev. This is an interesting one. If plugins are calibrated to -18 dBFS, do you normalize the track you master to that at the start? So this is, I think we're talking here about plugins that model analog hardware. So if you have maybe a channel strip or an emulation of a tube compressor, or if you have an actual piece of external gear, back in the day, in good old days of analog only, those pieces of gear were designed with a nominal operating level, which was often what is now -18 dBl UFS, was calibrated with a sine wave. So I think, yes, if you want to use one of those in your chain, you either want to use it early in the chain before you bring the level up so that you're not hitting those kind of plugins or that kind of analog gear too hot, or you want to calibrate in some way. I personally don't normalize in the sense of making everything a particular level. I tend to do it more by instinct and by ear, keeping an eye on the meters and all the rest of it. But I also, yes, would use a process like that early in the chain. So the first thing I do when I'm mastering a song is kind of get the level more or less in the ballpark and then start working on all the other processing. And I think at that point, that is where I would determine the gain going into the analog chain. But I'll throw that one out to you guys as well. How do you approach this? Do you kind of normalize things as standard, or do you do it by ear, or how does it work? William, how about you?
It depends of the material for me, but I tend to use the fader on Pro Tools just to match level my chain if needed. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Okay, cool. Dan?
Yeah, a little bit the same. I'm clip gain. I'm user clip gain of the W to achieve the desired gain staging to feed my analog loop. So it's most of the time I know exactly how far I can go and especially when I'm using the tape machine as a natural compressor. It's kind of playing with how far I can go until I'm happy with the results. So I'm not looking for numbers. I'm just feeling how it works and how I perceive the results. So it's most of the time, and then I'm checking my meter if I'm right. But most of the time it's just by feeling it and listening to it. Most of the time I'm even with closed eyes when I'm mastering. So.
That was an extra feature that we added to Perception AB. The toggle button you saw there where you flick between pre and post. Initially you had to click one and then click the other. And I was like, wait, but I want to close my eyes and just be able to click. So now it's a toggle switch. You just sit there with the mouse in one place and click to switch. So yeah, I think the whole eyes closed approach is worth preserving in mastering.
Funny. I take the opportunity to say that I need to jump.
That's fine.
Call.
Thank you so
much. Thanks for having me, and congrats to William. It's happy.
Thanks so much for being here, Dan. Really appreciate your time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Dan.
Take care, Dan.
Cheers.
Take care.
I think we're going to have to wind this up. It's getting close to midnight here in the UK, but I did one final thought on that, Kev. I think there was a kind of consensus here probably that, we tend to do these things by ear, but I think that's kind of based on understanding. And I mean, certainly I'm all for calibrating things when you set up, so understanding, because you get, there are pro and prosumer line levels going out to analog gear and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of, I have worked in a pro studio where a lot of that was done for me, luckily, so I didn't have to go through that pain. But I guess what I'm saying is I think, using a meter of some kind to get the levels in the right ballpark, especially when you're starting out, is a great way to go. Don't feel that you have to be, because one thing to say is that sometimes when you overdrive a piece of gear or an emulation of a piece of gear, it can sound really cool. And if it sounds really cool, then that's a valid approach, providing you and your clients are on board with it. I certainly think, having a knowledge of the idea that minus 18 kind of, and we're talking RMS, not peak, obviously, or VU or LUFS are roughly the same thing. That's a good way to get in the right ballpark. Excuse me. And then, once you kind of have that working knowledge and that understanding of how things are, then you can, it's kind of like anything else. It starts to become unconscious. It's a bit like learning to drive or ride a bike. After a while, the moves become almost instinctive. And that's great because then it gets even more fun. I'm really sorry we're seeing more questions coming in, but I've been talking all day. My voice is starting to go. By all means, carry on the chat, you guys, in the comments here, or head over to social media. If you enjoyed this, please do share it with people you know who might like to see it. Thank you for supporting Dynamic Range Day. As always, it really is great to hear all of the kind of success stories that have been coming in today. Thanks again, William and Ian, for being with us here. And William, congratulations on, all of your, I loved that track you sent me an example of recently. If that had been a part of an album, that could well have been on the shortlist for the award this year as well. So keep up the great work, and please keep telling me about the work that you're doing. Anybody who wants to take a look at the new version of Perception and get that loudness matching power in their mixing as well as in their mastering. I didn't mention as well, it's also completely latency free, which is fantastic for mastering. So even if you're using the old version, I'm not interested in mixing, it's worth having it, I think, for me, just for that feature alone, to get rid of those delays that were there with the original version. Anyway, yes, thank you very much, everybody. And as always, thanks for listening.